I'll never forget the expression on that police officer's face as he stood on my porch, squinting down at the complaint he was holding. "Mr. Thompson," he began, clearly struggling not to laugh. "I'm here regarding a violation of HOA landscaping codes and unauthorized exterior paint color." I couldn't help but grin as I leaned casually against the doorframe, taking a slow sip from my mug. "That's adorable," I said loudly enough to make sure it carried across the street. "I'm not even in the HOA." Out of the corner of my eye, I caught movement from across the road. There she was, Karen Mitchell, the self-appointed queen of the HOA, standing proudly in her perfectly manicured yard, like a guard dog that smelled trouble. Even from 50 feet away, I could see her jaw tighten as she realized her grand plan was falling apart. The officer glanced from me to her, then back at the papers in his hand, confusion spreading across his features. "Sir, are you positive? The complaint indicates that your property at 427 Oak Ridge Drive falls under Willowbrook HOA jurisdiction." Let me rewind about 6 months, because that's when this entire three-ring circus began. "My name's Dan Thompson, and I'm a software developer who works from home. After years of cramped apartment life, I finally managed to save enough to buy my own house. I found this charming 2-story place with a spacious yard perfect for the vegetable garden I always dreamed about. The neighborhood was quiet, clean, lined with trees, and full of friendly neighbors. Well, mostly friendly, as I'd come to learn. The crucial detail about my home purchase was its position. My house sat just outside the official boundary lines of Willowbrook HOA. I made absolutely sure of that before signing anything. My real estate agent showed me maps, documents, boundary sheets, everything. I loved the house and appreciated the area. Buta had zero desire to pay so someone could dictate what color my shutters could be. The previous owners even warned me about Karen Mitchell, the HOA president, who lived directly across the street. "She's particular," they said carefully. I met Karen on moving day. She marched over as I unloaded boxes, armed with a clipboard and wearing a smile so fake it should have been copyrighted. "Welcome to Willowbrook," she chirped in a voice sharp enough to strip varnish. "I'm Karen Mitchell, HOA president. I'll need you to fill out these membership forms and review our community standards." I set the box down and wiped my hands on my jeans. "Thanks for the greeting, but I'm not in the HOA. This house isn't part of Willowbrook." Her smile flickered like a faulty bulb. "Oh, but surely you'll want to join voluntarily. We maintain such high standards here." "I appreciate the offer," I replied, keeping it polite. "But I'm good." The temperature dropped instantly. Karen's eyes narrowed as she hugged her clipboard closer. "I see," she said, her voice now sharp and icy. "Well, I do hope you'll uphold our community standards regardless. We wouldn't want the neighborhood's value to decline." With that thinly veiled threat hanging between us, she spun around and marched back home. For the first month, everything was quiet. I got settled, arranged my home office, and began mapping out plans for the backyard. Then I committed what Karen considered my first major offense. I installed a vegetable garden in my front yard. Not the whole yard, just a nicely organized raised bed along the side of the driveway. I planted tomatoes, peppers, herbs, and some sunflowers to brighten the space. It looked great, if I may say so. Immediate neighbors loved it. The elderly couple next door even asked for tips. But Karen acted like I had defaced a national monument. The first letter arrived 2 days after I finished planting. It came on official Willowbrook HOA letterhead and was signed by Karen herself. "Dear homeowner," it began, "your recent landscaping modifications violate HOA Code Section 3.2 regarding approved plant varieties and garden placement. You have 7 days to remove the unauthorized garden or incur fines of $50 per day." I laughed and filed it away. She had no jurisdiction over me, and she knew it. When I didn't obey, the letters escalated. The next claim, I now owed $350 in accumulated fines. The following threatened legal action. Each letter became increasingly unhinged, with new imaginary violations added to the list. Apparently, my garden hose was the wrong color. My trash cans were visible from the street for 8 entire minutes on collection day, and my doormat was offensively non-neutral. Then came the big one. I painted my shutters. They had been boring beige when I moved in, and I wanted something with character. I chose a deep forest green that complemented the cream siding beautifully. I spent the weekend painting each shutter carefully, making sure they looked professionally done. My neighbor Tom even helped me with the second-story windows. "Looks sharp," he said, stepping back to admire the result. "Really makes the place pop." Karen's reaction was fast and dramatic. This time, she didn't just mail a letter. She stood in my driveway while I was at the hardware store, taking photos like she was documenting a crime scene. My security camera caught everything: her measuring tape, her color swatches, her scowl. The letter that followed was a masterpiece of bureaucratic nonsense. According to her, my shutters violated codes I was positive she invented on the spot. Forest Glen Green wasn't on the HOA's approved color list, which apparently consisted entirely of various soul-crushing shades of beige and gray, but letters weren't enough anymore. Karen ramped things up by calling in authorities. First came code enforcement. A weary inspector showed up one Tuesday morning with a clipboard. "We got a complaint about unpermitted modifications," he said apologetically. I showed him my permits for the garden beds and explained my home wasn't in the HOA. He nodded, scribbled a few notes, and left. "Sorry to waste your time," he said. "We get these calls occasionally." Next, she decided to report my solar panels to the city. I had installed them on my south-facing roof to cut down on energy costs. As always, I had all the proper permits, and everything was installed strictly according to code. The city inspector who came out actually complimented the setup. "Nice system," he said with a grin. "Wish more folks would switch to solar." Karen watched from her window as he gave me a thumbs up and drove off, clearly annoyed that she didn't get the result she wanted. The police visits began after I put up a small shed in my backyard. Nothing extravagant, just a simple structure to hold my tools and lawnmower. Officer Martinez was the first to show up, looking uncomfortable. "Sir, we got a report about an illegal structure and possible drug activity." I almost spit out my coffee. "Drug activity? It's a garden shed." He glanced at the shed, then at Karen's house. "Yeah, we figured as much. But we have to answer the call. Mind if I take a quick look?" I showed him the shed, stocked with rakes, potting soil, and a very suspicious-looking lawnmower. That was the moment I decided I'd had enough. I began documenting everything. Every letter was filed. Every interaction was written down in a journal. I added more security cameras until my entire property was covered. I even filed Freedom of Information requests with the city and the police department to obtain every complaint Karen had made against me. What I found left me stunned. Karen hadn't just been making false complaints. She had been telling officials that my house was HOA property and claiming she had the authority to enforce regulations on it. She'd submitted fabricated documents showing the HOA boundaries had been extended to include my property. She even forged what looked like board meeting minutes that supposedly authorized fines against me. The degree of deception was unbelievable. I brought the fat evidence folder to my friend Sarah, who happened to be a lawyer. She flipped through the pages with widening eyes. "Dan, this is harassment, deliberate false reporting, and possibly fraud," she said firmly. "You need to shut this down, and you need to shut it down hard. Together." We drafted a cease and desist letter that spelled everything out clearly. My property was not and never had been part of the Willowbrook HOA. Karen had zero authority over my home, and any further harassment would result in immediate legal action. I sent the letter via certified mail and watched from my window as Karen signed for it. My security camera captured her reaction perfectly. As she read it on her porch, the color drained from her face, then rushed back in a furious blush. She crumpled the letter and stormed back into her house. For 3 peaceful days, there were no letters, no officials, no ridiculous complaints. I almost believed she'd finally backed off, but then she made her biggest mistake yet. Karen called an emergency HOA board meeting to convince them to support what she called expanded enforcement to protect property values. But some board members had been following the situation and were fed up. Tom, my next-door neighbor and one of the board members, told me later how it went. "She tried to argue you were ruining the neighborhood," he said, "but when we asked for evidence, All she had were pictures of your totally legal shutters and vegetable garden. The board asked for the documents, claiming my house was within HOA boundaries. Karen stuttered and insisted she'd submitted everything to the HOA management company. But when they called during the meeting, the management company confirmed they had zero records listing my address. The board members exchanged looks of pure disbelief. One member, Janet, who also happened to be a lawyer, asked Karen point blank if she had been taking action without board approval. The room reportedly went silent. That was my moment to strike. Sarah had advised me to attend the next meeting as a guest, which the rules allowed. I walked in with my folder of evidence and asked to speak. Karen's face went from flushed red to ghostly white, and back again. "He can't be here," she shrieked. "He's not a member." Janet calmly reminded her that guests were permitted at open meetings. I was given 5 minutes. I made them count. I presented the county-stamped property boundary map, proving I was outside the HOA. I showed them the cease and desist letter. Then I revealed the documentation of Karen's false reports to city officials and police. "I am prepared to file harassment and false reporting charges," I said steadily. "But I'd prefer to resolve this without involving law enforcement." The board was horrified. Janet asked Karen directly if she had been submitting reports claiming HOA authority over my house. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a panicked goldfish. "I was just trying to protect community standards," she finally squeaked. "Someone has to maintain order." But the damage was already done. The board immediately held a vote of no confidence. Karen was removed as president by a vote of 6, with hers being the lone vote on her side. Her problems didn't stop there. The city had been conducting its own investigation into the false reports, and they weren't pleased about the wasted resources. Karen received an official warning for misusing emergency services and for filing false complaints. They informed her that any further incidents could result in criminal charges. The letter even mentioned possible fines up to $5,000 and potential jail time for repeat offenders, but the final blow came from an unexpected direction. Karen worked as an office manager at a local real estate firm, and word of her HOA crusade had spread through the neighborhood grapevine. Her boss got several concerned calls from clients who'd heard about the situation. In real estate, reputation is everything, and having an office manager known for harassment and falsifying complaints was bad for business. I wasn't there, but Tom told me that Karen was given an ultimatum: stop the harassment immediately or start packing. The combination of legal threats, her removal from the HOA, and pressure at work finally pierced her bubble of entitlement. She hired her own attorney, who apparently told her to cut off all contact with me and anyone else she'd been targeting outside HOA boundaries. The day after the meeting, I added a new feature to my front yard. Right beside my mailbox, I installed a small sign holder with a laminated copy of the official property boundary map. Above it, in cheerful green letters, matching my shutters, the sign read, "Not your HOA, not your problem." It was a little petty, I admit, but after months of nonsense, I felt I'd earned a moment of pettiness. The neighborhood's response was immediate and hilarious. Other homeowners outside the HOA boundaries started putting up their own signs. One neighbor created a historical marker-style sign that read, "Established 1952, still independent." Another planted an even bigger front yard garden than mine with a sign declaring, "HOA Free Zone Tomatoes Welcome." The rebellion spread quickly. Within a month, 3 more board members resigned, citing the toxic atmosphere Karen had created. The HOA, once notorious for strict enforcement, became noticeably more reasonable almost overnight. The new president, Janet, clarified the actual boundaries and apologized to anyone who had been wrongly harassed. She even complimented my shutters at the next meeting, saying they added personality to the neighborhood. As for Karen, she kept her job barely but lost every ounce of perceived power she once had. She still lives across the street, but now she stays focused on her own yard. Sometimes I catch her glaring at my vegetable garden from behind her blinds, but she doesn't dare speak. The police know her name now, and not in a flattering way. The city has her flagged for false reporting. The HOA wants nothing to do with her other than collecting dues. And then came the kicker: another neighbor, whom she'd harassed long before me, filed a civil lawsuit for emotional distress and legal costs about $20,000. Turns out, I wasn't her first victim, just the first one who fought back with documentation. At the settlement hearing last week, the judge ordered Karen to pay $15,000 in damages and fees. Her face crumpled as the amount was read aloud, and she actually began sobbing in court, insisting she was only trying to protect property values.